Good morning, everyone. I am Jerry Roth, president of UIA. I say morning because I'm here in San Francisco, though I know we have participants from all over the world, and I thank you all so much for being here. You know, we've jumped into an active new season here at UIA leading up to our annual Congress on October 28th. But this premier event, our Women Bar Leaders Day, is a centerpiece of our fall program. I first want to thank Elizabeth Soufi, who's with us today from Beirut, who has organized these sessions. We had our version in French last Wednesday. We will have our version in Spanish next Wednesday. But today we have an extraordinary panel of speakers in English, leaders of the bar in every sense of the word. From the president of the ABA, an organization of which I am a proud member, to the leaders of both the Bar Council of England and Wales and the Law Society of England and Wales, the immediate past president of AIJA, the International Young Lawyers Association, and the president of the Law Society of Hong Kong, joining us at an ungodly late hour there in Hong Kong. It has been just a wonderful honor and privilege for me this year to work with all of these inspiring leaders. As president of UIA, I consider them all friends. Before the COVID shutdown, I saw many of them around the world, and I'm very grateful they're here today to share their thoughts on the very critical issue of women in bar leadership. Increasing women in leadership remains a key principle, a foundational principle for UIA, and I look forward to hearing their thoughts. And with that, I want to turn the floor over to Kathleen HEYCOCK, a partner at Farrer & Co. in London, to whom I'm also grateful for moderating today. Thank you again, and welcome, Kathleen.
Thank you, Jerry, and thank you to all our panelists and all you attendees for making time today for this excellent session. As Jerry says, my name is Kathleen HEYCOCK, and I'm a partner at the London law firm Farrer & Co., and I'm an employment lawyer and a member of the UIA Labour Law Commission. I'm really looking forward to what the panelists have to say today, and I know it's going to be relevant and useful to me in all my different roles. Like many of you listening and watching today, I've got several roles in my life. This is going to be interesting to me as an employment law professional. Of course, gender issues in the workplace are a key part of my job. I'm also a partner in a law firm. I manage some amazing female young lawyers and have been inspired by just as amazing women who have been blazing the trail before me. I'm also the wife of a male lawyer who is a keen supporter of women, both at home, luckily for me, and in the workplace. And then finally, I'm the mother of two intelligent young girls with so much to offer the world. And I know every mother says that, but in my case, I promise it's true. And importantly, I want their future to be fair and equal. So I know you'll all have your own reasons for wanting to hear these wonderful women speak about their life in law, and I'm sure you'll not be disappointed. So today, I'm going to introduce each speaker before they speak, and then they will each speak for 10 or 15 minutes. If you've got any questions, then I'll try and ask some specific questions to that speaker at the end of their slot, but there'll be a chance for a more general discussion and comments at the end. And please post your questions in the Q&A section of the Zoom facility, and not in the general Zoom chat, because that's where I'll be looking for the questions. As Jerry said, we'll aim to finish on time at the 2-hour mark because we've all got busy lives and I know you need to get back to them. We'll go to bed for those of you who are at the end of your day. So, time to hand over to our first speaker, who is Trish REFO. So Trish is the president of the American Bar Association, which I'm sure you know is the largest voluntary association of attorneys and legal professionals in the world. She's a partner at Snell and Wilmer in Phoenix, and there she also chairs the firm's professional liability litigation group. She's had lots of roles in the ABA, including serving on the ABA's largest practice group, the section of litigation, and she's also the chair of the ABA Standing Committee on Membership. And has got all sorts of other roles there, which I'm sure she'll tell you about. Outside of the ABA and her law firm, she served on the advisory committee of the Federal Rules of Evidence of the United States and on the Arizona Supreme Court's advisory committee. She's got so many awards and recognitions, from being in the 50 most influential women lawyers in America back in 2007, and also receiving the President's Award from the State Bar of Arizona. Trish, we're looking forward to hearing about your journey to such incredible successes. Over to you.
Thank you, Kathleen, and from Phoenix, I will say good morning as well to all of you around the world. It's really a treat to be here today. And you know, as I was preparing for this, I reflected on the fact that when I started as a lawyer, you couldn't have held this event in, I don't think, one language, much less three. That is the growth in the number of women in leadership positions in law and in our bar associations has been pretty exponential throughout the course of my years as a lawyer, which is not to say we don't have a lot more work to do, but we can celebrate the progress we've made at the same time that we with clarity see and discuss how much farther we still need to go. So I became a member of the American Bar Association when I was a very young lawyer, because one of the senior partners at the law firm I worked with in Chicago in those days told me I should join the ABA. And I remember the conversation quite clearly, and my response was probably pretty close to, yes, sir, I will. And so I did. And in those days, for sure, I was one of a relatively small handful of women who were active in any bar association in those days. And I just kept volunteering. I kept offering to do, maybe at the beginning, as you do as a young lawyer, some of the less attractive tasks that need to be completed. I made sure every time that I completed what I volunteered to do and that I did it well. One of the strategies, especially as a young lawyer, that I used was to think of my bar work as just one of my cases. That is, it was something that was of equal importance, maybe not completely equal, but high importance, along with the work I was doing for clients. And keeping it at that level of priority made me be disciplined in getting the work done and meeting the deadlines for my bar work, just as I did for everything else. And I truly just kept volunteering, while at the same time working really hard, I hope, to develop my skills as a lawyer. Because first and foremost, to be a meaningful leader in the bar, we have to be good at the craft that we employ with our clients day in and day out. So you're kind of working on two tracks at the same time, if you will. There were, for sure, times, especially as a young lawyer, when it was clear to me at social events, for example, that my older male colleagues at the bar thought I was someone's date or someone's girlfriend or whatever. And my strategy was to just sort of ignore all of that when it happened. It was distasteful, for sure. I didn't like it very much, for sure. But I just decided sort of never mind, and kind of powered through it. Now, they were never ugly, right? They were not derogatory comments or any overt discrimination with which I would have dealt differently. Just an assumption in those days that if you were female and you were at particularly the social events, it must be because you were there with someone else. So throughout all of that, like all of us, I worked to find mentors, both in my law firm, outside my law firm, and at the bar, to help me be better as a lawyer and as a bar association wannabe leader, I guess. And I think it's really important to say that men and women can and should be our mentors. I learn differently. I learned different skills. I learned different approaches by having a wide variety of different mentors, right, who could teach me in different ways from their different sets of experiences. So as a young lawyer, when I saw the first woman be elected as president of the American Bar Association, which it took, I don't know, I think 115 or 20 years of the ABA's existence to make happen. When I saw the first woman and the second woman and the third woman to be elected as president of the ABA, I made it my mission to be sure that they could pick me out of a lineup, that they could recognize me and know me at least a little bit. And over the years, of course, I have been fortunate to develop incredible friendships with all of the women who've served as president of the ABA. I am now the 10th, and it is my fervent hope that the woman who serves as the 11th woman president of the ABA will not actually take that title. It is my fervent hope that when she takes office, we will be past the place where we count. So I consider it both an enormous privilege and kind of a terrible thing that I am friends with every single woman who has ever been president of the ABA. When I say an enormous privilege, obviously, these are remarkable women, each one of whom has reached out to help me and has been part of my path to leadership of the ABA. But when I say horrible thing, you know, we've got 144 presidents and only 10 have been women. And there is a recognition in that I wish we could have started sooner in electing women into these roles. I actually think, in my country at least, that the organized bar has been a very hospitable place for women lawyers to demonstrate their leadership and their capacities as lawyers. I think our bar associations have in some ways come farther than perhaps our large law firms have. It is a welcoming place for women, the ABA. I think that's true of our state bars as well, any number of whom have women presidents at any given time. We are past the firsts. We are past the seconds. And that is good news for all of us. But I think because the organized bar collectively has worked so hard to advance women, that it is actually, as I've said, a really good place now for women to excel and to achieve and to be recognized as leaders at the bar. Much of that in the ABA is a function of our Commission on Women in the Profession, which has worked for many, many years, both to advance the role of women inside the ABA and to advance the role of women in the United States in the legal profession. The first chair of the Commission on Women, when it was formed, was a female lawyer from Arkansas named Hillary Rodham Clinton, who went on to do some other things. But we are proud that she was our first chair of the Commission on Women. And she set us on a path to being really focused on advancing women and in particular in understanding what remaining barriers exist, at least in our country, for the advancement of women. And I commend to you a number of the publications by the Commission on Women, many of which are just available on our website, that are around understanding and describing the challenges for women in big law firms, and most recently, the challenges that women of color in particular face in law in the United States. And finally, an interesting and important study called Walking Out the Door, which is about why senior women choose to leave the legal profession in the United States in numbers that are way too big. The notion that women leave in their childbearing years because of kids and family issues is simply wrong. And the evidence indicates that women choose to leave throughout the life cycle of a career lawyer. So particularly senior women who choose to leave, I think that's a problem for our profession that we need to continue to address and to fix. So I am heartened by all of the change that I've seen in the years that I've practiced, and at the same time, I focus on what remains to be done. We do not have women partners in our large law firms in the percentage that we should have. We do not have women of color who are partners at our major law firms in anywhere near the percentage that we should have. So we have lots of work ahead of us, and I look forward to hearing all of the terrific panelists, my colleagues on this program, to hear their ideas about other things we can do to advance women around the world. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Trish. Now, if you've got any questions, then please just pop them in the Q&A section, and I'll just talk briefly. Trish, you might want to put your camera back on, because I might just give people a chance to put any questions if they have any. I just found two of your comments really fascinating, and one is the fact of you're the 10th and you don't want to know the 11th. And I think to the other panelists, I might come back to that later, because actually some of you are first, and obviously one of you is at least the 10th, and it'd be really interesting to explore some of the reasons for that, although Trish has given some explanation there. The other point was really interesting was Hillary Rodham Clinton's role in this. Trish, do you see any future Hillarys around you who might address some of those issues that you just mentioned at the end about women of colour and the different people who yet need to be given the opportunity in your country?
Well, there are Hillarys all around me, and that's one of the great joys, I think, for all of us in our bar work. Lawyers are by definition people who want to solve problems. They are by definition, I think, leaders. And so the women within a group of that I just described who rise to the top in the organized bar are an extraordinary bunch of women. I mean, the women you're going to hear from later this morning are amazing women. So yes, I think we are raising up young lawyers, not just because they will help us to run our professions, but because they will help us to run our countries in the future. I think that's a key part of what we should want to do as more senior women lawyers.
Sorry, I was still muted. I said, great, thank you, that's inspirational, and I love that. There are many, in this country as well, there are many excellent former lawyers in government. Some of them need to sort themselves out at the moment, but we have plenty there as well. So I love that as a call for inspiration. So I don't see any questions at the moment, although my screen has just unhelpfully blocked this section, which has Q&As. Oh, actually, I do have one, Trish, sorry. So we've got a question from Barbara, I'm using everybody's first names today, saying, at a function, Trish, how would you suggest women interact with other attorneys when their spouses are there? And I'm assuming that this comes from an experience which I've actually had, which is where I find there are more wives brought along to events than husbands are brought along generally. So do you have any views on that, Trish, about how you interact perhaps with the more likely to be female spouse? Yeah,
I have an interesting perspective on that. So I will just fess up that I met my husband at an ABA meeting, which is either, you know, really sweet or kind of sad, depending on how you choose to think about it. So when I moved from Chicago to Phoenix, it was because I got married and I thought my husband and I should live in the same city, and he was here in Phoenix. My point is that when I first started at my law firm here, which is a large firm, my husband, of course, had been practicing in Phoenix for a couple of decades, and at my own partner meetings, he was early on introducing me to my partners because he knew my partners and I hadn't yet had the chance to make the rounds to meet everybody. So spouses can be helpful, but yeah, you always have to be willing to kind of assert yourself a little bit. It's still too frequently the case that people assume that if you're the woman, you're the spouse, not the person who's there in her own right. And you just, I find, just need to sort of assert yourself and make it kind of clear politely who you are And increasingly, that is all it takes, right? At least in the US, I think. People are trained now to get past, at least outwardly, the stereotypes of the guy being the lawyer and the woman being the wife.
Great, thank you. You can turn your camera off now and we'll move over to Amanda, if that's okay. So Amanda PINTO is chair of the Bar Council for 2020, having previously been the chair of the International Committee for 4 years, from 2014 to 2018. Amanda was called to the bar in 1983. She specialises in business wrongdoing, including international fraud, corporate crime, market abuse, corruption, and money laundering. She was appointed a part-time judge in 2003. She was then made a QC in 2006 and was made a bencher of Middle Temple in 2014. And she's going to be able to explain all of those terms to those attendees of this unfamiliar with the UK system. Amanda also contributes to 3 different legal tomes, a corporate criminal liability tome, one on asset recovery, and also Blackstone's criminal practice. So she's got an equally impressive CV. So thank you, Amanda, for sharing your views today.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, in the UK, it's 100 years, 8 months, 2 weeks and 6 days since women were recognised by law as people, and we are allowed to practice in the legal professions. And 2020 is the first year of the second 100 years, so progress is gathering momentum. In 2020, I'm the 3rd woman chair of the bar in 8 years and the 4th in 126. I'm the 2nd to have children and the 1st to have them go to day school. Each of those great barristers who went before me has moved the dial for women in law. And I wanted to speak a little bit about my journey to my position of leadership. I've never had an overarching plan. In fact, many of my career decisions have been made thinking I was doing the right thing at the time, but looking back, whether through good luck, bad luck, chance, or rarely design, my professional life has been more of a series of zigzags than a cable car up the mountain. If I have any advice, it's that you should put yourself forward for the work you want with conviction, confidence, and determination, and be adaptable and open-minded. It may well be that you end up, perhaps not long after you start, doing work you never thought you would. I got a general common law commercial pupillage, doing all sorts of different areas of law. But my first choices ended up not being good ones for me. I was finally accepted in a criminal chambers. That was the last place I thought I would go, but I really liked the people interviewing me, and once there, I loved the reality of daily advocacy in courts. I started off arguing cases, from not paying car tax, to stabbings, to benefit fraud, to drug supply, you name it, I argued it. I prosecuted and I defended, which you can do in England and Wales. Glamorous locations at the end of tube lines or beyond the suburbs and into towns with bad reputations. I tried to persuade, and I can honestly say that I found my professional home in the criminal courts. I mainly loved my time in chambers, in effectively the law firm that barristers work in. They were generally very friendly. I wasn't like the other members of chambers in one respect. They were all men. After another woman and I were taken on at an extraordinary chambers meeting, a story for the end if we have time, it was only after another 6 pupils or trainees had been made tenants that the next female barrister, now a QC, a judge at the Central Criminal Court, the most serious criminal court in the UK, and a member of the Judicial Appointment Commission, was taken on. There have been improvements since I started, both in terms of women and those from diverse backgrounds, at the bar and the judiciary, but it has taken time and there is a very long way to go. Looking back, I made 6 hugely significant work choices, at least 3 of which infuriated my clerks who tried to manage my practice, and which undermined my practice in the short term. Those 6 work choices were: I stopped working outside London, generally speaking. I decided to leave the bar. I stopped doing sex cases. I wrote a book, I joined the International Committee of the Bar Council, and I moved chambers or law firm. I stopped going out to Suffolk and Norfolk, over 60 miles away from London, to prosecute in 1986. And as my age is no longer a secret, really, if you were listening, I was very, very junior, and this was Chambers Patch. I decided not to carry on going there because in order to get to Norwich Crown Court in time for the court day, you had to take the 6 a.m. train from Liverpool Street Station, which was then a very dingy relic from a Dickensian black and white film adaptation, served by the long and irregular service with other train companies' discarded rolling stock. And after a full day in court, you then had to take the train all the way back, go to chambers late in the evening to get the next day's work, and you got paid no more than going to the local magistrates' court, the lower criminal court. So that was number one. Number two, I decided to leave the bar. In 1988, I had a baby. So Chambers thought I would not, and many thought I should not, come back to work, and that my levels of determination should be tested in terms of geography. Court in Eastern England in the morning and west of London in the afternoon, for example. The upside was that my practice was so bad that I decided to leave the bar and go and run the Tate Gallery. Rather than just chucking it all in, I decided I'd better see if I was suited to working in art, and I did a diploma in the history of art at Birkbeck College of the London University in the evenings, which I absolutely loved. During that year or so, my practice improved and I never did leave the bar, but it did make me really consider my career and how much I enjoyed it. I stopped doing sex cases. I eventually stopped doing sex cases when my youngest was 4. Of course, everyone wanted a woman to represent them in sex cases, so it was easy for my clerks to get that work. But I hated them. I couldn't leave them behind as they played over and over in my head. And importantly, they prevented me ever taking even a medium-sized fraud because I was already committed here and there for 2 or 3 days, week in, week out, in very serious cases affecting people's lives that could not be given to another lawyer to take, meaning that my diary could never accommodate a 2 or 3 week trial. I could not diversify or change my practice. When I stopped doing sex cases, my diary suffered, but I couldn't have been more relieved at leaving them behind. And after a few months, I got work I much preferred and which paved the way to advance my career to focus on dishonesty, drugs and violence, a phrase I think many people will want to say when they're thinking about how to sum up their career. Each of these personal decisions was really important in shaping my career for what I wanted it to be and, as importantly, what I didn't want it to be. I never thought about seeking a leadership role, but I did think about what I wanted my career to be like, and I urge you to do the same. The last 3 were more positive. I wrote a law book on corporate crime. I make the princely sum of £5 per copy sold, but it has been instrumental in my career development and getting instructions in cases. I became a member, then vice chair and then chair of the International Committee. That was the most wonderful position to hold, meeting lawyers from other jurisdictions, such as those on this call, discussing the rule of law, helping training lawyers and judges overseas, making links with barristers from home, but from different practice areas. Fantastic. I moved chambers 6 years ago. It was agonizing to do, but doubtless the right step for me, and I have had a very extended honeymoon period. I haven't mentioned becoming a Queen's Counsel because I don't think of it as a career choice, rather as a wonderful award. But that has provided many of the most unexpected and brilliant opportunities for me. I've been asked to help with things that are such a privilege to be involved with, purely because I have that internationally respected title. To help draft an amicus brief for the Iraqi High Tribunal that Saddam Hussein should be charged with rape by his soldiers as a war crime. Or writing a letter to President Obama to stop the US's prevention on the use of foreign aid for girls to access abortion when raped in war on behalf of 50 QCs. Or teaching Omani judges and prosecutors about bringing bribery cases, quite apart from the day job, which has been extremely interesting and enjoyable. It never occurred to me that I could conceivably be chair of the Bar of England and Wales until about 4 years ago. I'm a huge believer in the bar as a fundamental part of our justice system, working effectively for society. And frankly, if I wasn't, I wouldn't have put myself forward for election. Equality of opportunity for all barristers on merit, regardless of background, gender or connections, is what matters to me. I want the best people to be part of and thrive at the bar. I feel strongly that as a profession, we must positively advance and sustain a culture of support for each other, the better to improve every barrister's practice and the better to serve the public. That is why I stood. I'm not interested in tick boxes. I want to change things for the better. There's always room for improvement. The Bar Council is aware of the challenges everyone faces in carving out and maintaining a fulfilling career, but especially for those from non-traditional backgrounds, and especially during COVID-19. To that end, we've already had several initiatives that weren't available when I was starting out or even more experienced. Needless to say, there was no maternity policy in chambers or promoted by the Bar Council when I had my children. I do think that they have changed things and will continue to change things for the better, but we need to drive change forward and we mustn't take our foot off the pedal. Retention of women remains a huge problem, and so is the lack of women and those from different backgrounds in senior positions. I'll just mention 4 initiatives that I think will help and is helping. At the Bar Council, and I know the Law Society is doing similar things, we have numerous inclusion and diversity support programs, including one called the Accelerator Project, one which is called #IamTheBar, a thriving social mobility campaign expanding year after year. And just this week, we've announced our new Bar Council leadership program to expand the group of future leaders of the bar. Secondly, we are really keen that we must press forward on fair processes for pupilages and fair allocation of work. This is massively important. If you don't get the opportunities from the beginning of your career and sustain them throughout, your career won't flourish and you won't be happy. And that is part of the reason why we lose people. Thirdly, well-being. At a time of increasing technological advances, the unforeseen consequences of loneliness, increased isolation, and the temptation to be constantly available to clients must be dealt with, and it's only been exacerbated by COVID-19. We've got the Wellbeing at the Bar project, and I'm pleased it's now part of normal conversation, along with help for mental illness, because these things are happening all the time. And confidential helplines is the 4th thing, to report wrong behaviour, bullying and harassment at the bar and on the bench. It's anonymous, confidential and easy to use. And I think those big initiatives, along with the others, will really help to move the dial. Well, back to my tenancy meeting last century. It was the first democratic vote in chambers. There was no secret ballot, as there always had been, where one vote against you meant no success. And there were no mobile phones. So the morning after the vote, I came into chambers and my lovely pupil supervisor said to me, "How are you this morning?" And I said, "It rather depends what you say how I am." And he said, "Well, yesterday you were taken on and today you aren't." This is what had happened. Senior Queen's Counsel to Head of Chambers, "John, we're a male prosecuting set. We simply cannot have women." Head of Chambers to Senior Queen's Counsel, "Tim, I entirely agree." So they changed the result of the vote. It took the joint efforts of our pupil supervisors and others to say no. Chambers had made the rules for the meeting, they have abided by them and got a decision. And so we were taken on. And at the drinks party that evening, a barrister, meaning to be kind, said to me, "Amanda, I'm so pleased you've joined us. Now there'll be someone to sew on my buttons." If I can make it to the top of the profession, so can anyone else. Invest in yourself so that you can help to make our professions a more brilliant place to be. Support others as I was supported, and aim for the horizons. If you persevere, you will get there. It may take longer, it may be harder, It may not be a straight route, but the achievement will be sweet when you arrive.
Thank you, Amanda. And I'm pleased that you covered that Chambers meeting, because I was definitely going to ask you about that now. What an absolutely astonishing conversation, and perhaps all the more that it was reported to you quite brazenly by the sound of it, because you weren't there, you were told about that afterwards.
Yeah, well, I suppose he had to tell me because, as you said, last night you were taken on and this morning you're not.
Gosh, well, I'm sure we're all very pleased, and you as well, that they did change their mind. But you're right, you said it was in the last century. It feels like it was maybe the century before that in its attitudes. I'm just going to wait and see if anybody has any questions. While we're waiting for that, one of the things that you said really struck me, which was this work type, the type of work that you were doing, and your decision to move away from those sex cases, which people really wanted to give to a woman, to allow you to have those fraud cases. And I think that this is something that comes up a lot in all aspects of law, in solicitors' firms and in barristers' chambers, that there is some work which is considered to be women's type work, and some which is men's, and then people get sort of shoehorned into that, and it turns out the men's one is often better paid.
I totally agree. And I think that is why fair allocation of work is so important, and it goes actually from the client. You have to kind of re-educate and make sure that everybody is on the same page on this. So you've got to, if you're a barrister, obviously most of your cases come from solicitors. So it's not just the end client, it's also the professional client, it's also solicitors. Everybody needs to be very careful, as well as the clerks from those who are administering and handing out the work and encouraging people's practices. But also other barristers, you know, who you choose as your junior, or who you say might be good to co-defend. All of those things need to have a really clear view of how the work is allocated.
And so how do you think that will change? You say education, but how do we actually educate those people? I mean, obviously women doing very well and being successful in those traditionally male jobs will help, but chicken and egg.
Well, I think one of the things to do is measure it. I think as soon as it's a bit like being on a diet. You think you're doing really well, but if you do that horrible thing, which I actually never do, of a food diary, you know exactly how many biscuits you ate while you were hungry as anything at 5 o'clock before you had your salad for dinner. So I think it's really important to measure it.
Thank you. We've had one question which could possibly be for me as the employment lawyer on the call, which is, in 2020, would the comment about sewing on buttons be considered a disciplinary offence? Now, Amanda, you might have a view on how the Bar Council might view that.
Well, he certainly didn't understand my strengths and weaknesses, I can tell you that. I don't think so. I mean, it's obviously inappropriate. I genuinely, actually, I don't know the answer to the question. I suppose I have had different experiences to Trish. I've had quite serious experiences, sexist experiences actually. But of course, a lot of it at that time, one just sort of took as being par for the course and rolled your eyes and hoped for the best. But I mean, now I'm delighted to say things have moved on.
Great.
Although from something I got today, not necessarily entirely.
All right, well, thank you, Amanda. I think it's time to move on to the next speaker, and thank you for the questions that are coming in, and some of them I'll save to later on for the general discussion. So I'm going to move over now to Paula FUDAKOWSKA, who is the immediate past president of AIJA, which, for those of you who don't know, is the International Association of Young Lawyers. And it's got 4,000 members from 90 different countries, so it's very similar, and indeed grew out of, as I understand, the UIA. During her presidency, Paola focused on diversity and inclusion issues in the legal profession, so she should have some really sort of wide-ranging experience to speak about today. Paola's a UK qualified litigator. She's got 15 years of experience at a leading international law firm in both London and in Geneva. And she's also part of the legal directorate at the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office in London. Paola acts before the European Court of Human Rights and advises on EU exit and human rights issues. So we may even get to hear about Brexit at some point during this discussion, which we haven't talked about for a while. So Paola's an amazing inspiration to young lawyers, and I'll hand over to her now.
Thank you very much, Kathleen, for that introduction. So yes, as Kathleen mentioned, I'm the immediate past president of AIJA, quite freshly baked. I stood down as president 3 weeks ago after our annual Congress. And well, it was quite a year, I think, for most of us who are in leadership positions, particularly in the last 6 months. It's been challenging in all sorts of different ways. I have to say I absolutely relished that challenge. But perhaps it would be better that I start with a little bit about my journey as to how I got into AIJA and to give you a bit more of a flavour of what the organisation is about. As Kathleen mentioned, we have about 4,000 members from 90 countries, and 58 years ago there was a small group of members who actually did break away from the UIA, and they were the founding members of AIJA. One of the purposes being to focus on junior to mid-level professionals. We are called the Association of Young Lawyers, and we stretch the meaning of young, which means that our members are those aged 45 and under. So it's an organisation that was brought to my attention by some fellow London litigators, in fact, who were quite involved in the organisation, as well as a partner at the firm at which I was at the time, who had been very involved back in the 1970s, so quite close to when AIJA was founded back in the early 60s. And it just so happened that the event that was brought to my attention was taking place in Switzerland. And that coincided quite neatly with the opening of our firm's office in Geneva. So it was considered a moment where it might be quite useful to send some representatives from our firm to an international networking event, as well as attending some meetings in Geneva while our new offices were opening up. And I suppose what I should say at this moment is a bit like Trish mentioned earlier, that she was invited by, one of her partners to join the ABA. Similarly for me, I think I saw an opportunity here, and I had the support of the partner with whom I was working with at the time, which I would say is actually quite unusual. I was a junior associate, 1 or 2 years qualified, and this particular partner recognised that this could be a new initiative to bring into the team, and clearly one that I was quite keen to pursue along with another colleague in our team. So I suppose the first tip there is, if you're given an opportunity, take it, because you just don't know where it's going to take you. And certainly for me, I'm not sure I would have hazarded a guess that I'd be leading that association a decade later. So I very quickly got involved in the association. Within a couple of years, I was on the organising committee of the half-year conference, which is one of our flagship events in London, and that attracted record-breaking numbers at that time. And I found it was an incredible way not only to be developing my international network, but also my network amongst English lawyers, and principally those in London, from other law firms who are not necessarily in the same area of practice as me. But it was an opportunity to get to know other law firms, competitor law firms, and actually pretty useful for conflict referral work. So that was, I think, a really nice way of building friendships, not only internationally, but also domestically. I was also involved in organising seminars in the Private Client Commission and the Litigation Commissions, both of which I was actively involved in. And that led then to my being invited to take over the role as national representative. What that means is in each country, AIJA has a person who leads that group of members in that country, and the principal aim is to grow membership in that country. And the UK, rather surprisingly at that time, had a relatively low membership, which was really interesting, because actually the few of us who were involved were really engaged and were attending many of the events throughout the year. So that was really the challenge with which I was faced, was to start to increase the UK membership, not least because I think that was also a target for the association, was to increase its existence in English-speaking countries, so not only England, but also the US. I think that was something which I took on with some relish. And from that grew the idea that perhaps we should go on as the group of London lawyers who are quite significantly invested in the association to host the annual Congress in London. And that's exactly what happened. And it was, again, another record-breaking event. It was over 5 days. It was quite an extraordinary experience. One of the things that stands out for me personally was the opening address at the Guildhall. At the time, this whole event was supported by Boris Johnson, who was the Mayor of London at the time. Michael Gove, who was the Justice Secretary at the time, came and gave an address at the same opening, as did Shami Chakrabarti, who many of you might know as quite a prolific human rights lawyer in the UK. So that was really quite something. And it was also a moment where, again, this group of lawyers who I got to know better over the years, who had become friends, many of whom had become friends, that we had just built this extraordinary event. And needless to say, that did have an impact on UK membership. And we are now in the top 3 or 4 when it comes to membership size in the association. So that is a wonderful thing. And it was really, I suppose, at this moment that I had, I suppose, that go for it moment, if you like, thinking about, you know, whether I wanted to, I suppose, develop my commitment in the association. Having led the London Congress, and after it having been such a success, it was sort of the next question, I think, certainly raised by other people directly with me, and also before then. I even remember one of my colleagues at the firm had raised it with me some years previously to that, and I was quite surprised by that. So I suppose the seed had been sown and it was just growing over time. And I think after the London Congress, it was probably a moment for me where, I suppose, if you like, I had that confidence to go forward and say, yes, actually, I think I could probably do this. And especially, I think, when you've got that support around you, again, it's a bit like being offered an opportunity. Why would you say no? So that was really how my application for presidency came about. I think it was that support around me, and also having proven myself in terms of leading one of the biggest events that the association hosts each year. And so the way that it works in AIJA is you're effectively a president for 3 years, but in 3 different capacities. So you get voted in as a vice president. And so you have this year where you're on the management board, you watch your predecessor effectively doing what they're doing. And there are effectively 3 of you in the presidency. So there's that really nice transition between the vice president, who spends a year looking at how the management of the association is running. Then you jump feet first into your presidency role. And then after finishing your presidency role, it's rather nice that the association doesn't boot you out straight away. You take on the role which I currently have as immediate past president, where you remain on the board and you're there to offer your expertise and guidance following your experience as president. So my experience of that has certainly been enormously positive. The past 2 years have been incredible in terms of the other people that we've had on our board, and I'm really looking forward to this year ahead, continuing with the diversity and inclusion mandate, which I started during my presidency. It probably makes sense just to talk a little bit about AIJA, and when we're talking about, you know, women in leadership and how that translates into the membership of AIJA. So AIJA has had some 5 female presidents in the last 10 years, of which I was the 5th. The 6th is coming into office next year. So those are pretty good statistics, I think, by any account. And over 50%, or about 50% of our leadership is female, and over 60% of our members who are in leadership, 60% of our members are in leadership roles in their law firms. So we've certainly got, you know, a very engaged group of people. And during my presidency, together with another member who was particularly passionate about the project, we launched the AIJA Women Network. And this was really, I think, building on AIJA's natural inclusion. We're very much an association where everybody celebrates each other's successes. And the launch of the AIJA Women Network was really just to shine a light on something that we already have within the organisation, but to perhaps look a little bit more critically at the challenges that women face in their careers in the legal profession, and also to learn from each other in terms of what policies or practices have been implemented by law firms in order to address this issue. At our virtual congress, which we hosted 3 weeks ago, we had the inaugural session which focused on bias. And that's certainly something that's not limited to gender. It's limited across the board. As human beings, we are naturally biased. And that certainly feeds into the whole conversation on diversity and inclusion. And our next session, which will be run next month, is going to focus specifically on engaging men in diversity and inclusion issues and on championing women in leadership roles. So I'm really looking forward to taking that forward. I suppose I'd like to say a little bit also about my career, which has taken, I think, quite an interesting path. As Kathleen mentioned, I was in private practice for 15 years with an international law firm in London and then in Geneva. I am a litigator, and I had a specific focus on trusts and high net worth family wealth disputes, which was something that I absolutely loved. It took me to all corners of the globe. I had the privilege of seeing the inside of courtrooms in the Caribbean, in the Channel Islands, and all of that was really quite a remarkable experience, alongside with my commitment as part of AIJA. So I certainly racked up the air miles, I think it's fair to say. I also met some extraordinary people, both clients and the lawyers with whom I worked. And I think that taught me a lot. It taught me, I suppose, about the diversity of people and the challenges that people face in their personal and business lives. And I think all of that was highly stimulating and a wonderful way in which to spend, I suppose, the initial years of my career. And I think there came a moment about the time that I decided to take the plunge with the AIJA presidency. And it's funny how many different changes can happen all at once, but I think that's not unusual for anyone, is that about at this moment, I decided to leave private practice and move to Geneva to pursue a master's in international humanitarian law and human rights. And really making a decision there to change the focus of my practice effectively from private international law to public international law. And I combined that with continuing to work for my firm on a consultancy basis, and really jumping into the Geneva environment, which has, of course, all the international organisations and a large number of NGOs which deal with human rights and other public international law issues. So that also coincided, I hate to mention the B word, but it was around the time that our country voted to leave the EU. And I think it was a moment where I felt, as a lawyer, that was something that I wanted to be a part of and be involved in. So, and I think that that was, of course, a big decision to make, but absolutely just one of the best things I've ever done. And so I suppose one thing I would say to those listening is that it's so important to go for what you're passionate about. I think Amanda has already mentioned that, and it's so important to do that and keep evaluating what you're doing in your professional practice, and whether that is still something that you are enjoying doing and that you're good at, and are there other things that perhaps you want to explore. I think it's never too late to do that. I'd like to say a few words as well about, I suppose, the UK legal profession, which, again, Amanda has touched on a little bit, and I'm sure we'll hear also a bit more from Stephanie. I suppose my personal experience of being in a large international law firm was that actually it was a very, how should we say, a very supportive environment for women. Many of the partners are women. We were the first firm to have a female chairman, and the managing partner at the moment is a woman and has been the same managing partner for over a decade now. So I suppose my experience was quite specific in that my working environment was very supportive of women, and making sure that their ambitions could be fulfilled as they climbed the ladder. But I know that that's probably not true of everyone's experience, and not only in the UK, but across the world, of course. We are marking on Friday the International Day for Pay Equality, and apologies if I've got the terminology wrong there, but I think the point is that we are there's a day marking the fact that there is still a difference between women and men when it comes to the pay gap. And I think in the UK, the figures there at the moment stand at a staggering between 50 to 67%. And that is really quite extraordinary, and just goes to show how much more work there is to be done in that area. But let's also focus on the positives. The UK, the Law Society of England and Wales, and we're about to hear from Stephanie, who's the incoming president. Well, Stephanie is about to be the incoming president, and there's also been a very successful past president, Christina, who I think many of you will be familiar with. And I suppose that is the point, isn't it? That women are taking on these roles, and when you look at the panel of us here today, and you know, the breadth of experience and the geographical stretch as well, is just really quite inspirational to see. So I think closing words, well, I'm probably going to pick up on what I've already mentioned, is recognise that life is a long journey, if we're lucky, and there are many different stages that we go through, I think, in life. And when we're talking about why women are leaving the profession, that could be one perspective, I suppose, that I would like to offer, is that perhaps women are a bit more tuned in as to how their lives change, and perhaps how their values might change and their interests might change. And that they perhaps, well, are courageous in doing that, and perhaps moving on to something else and adapting their career accordingly. I think that was certainly my experience, and like I say, I've never looked back. And I would encourage everyone to be courageous and to be reflective as to what it is that they are engaged with doing every day. The legal profession is such a wonderful profession to be part of, and there's so many different ways in which you can contribute. And I suppose, yes, be courageous. You'll never regret what you do, whereas you will always wonder what you didn't. And I'm certainly, I wake up every morning pretty excited to see what's next. Having now finished the AIJA presidency, I think that's more true than ever. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what's next on the horizon. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Paola. I'll just wait and see if there's any specific questions for you. There's a couple of questions that's popped up that sort of fit into a few themes that I'll address at the end. One thing I just wanted to pick up on with you, Paola, is something that you said right at the end about being courageous, which I think is such a fantastic piece of advice that we should all take. But then also something that you said at the beginning that chimes with the others have said, which is volunteer and get stuck in. And I suppose there's a lot of us, and I'm thinking about myself here, who feel slightly drowning in client work, things to do at home, being a mother, being a wife, being a good friend, a good colleague, whatever it might be. And actually, how do you find that time? How have you made that? I know that Trish said she made it almost as important as her client work, and I think that's hard to do sometimes. Do you have any tips?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like Trish, I've always treated my AIJA work really as a client and something that I devote the necessary time that it takes to get things done, and that it doesn't just go to the bottom of the pile. So that's very important, and I would encourage people to look at it that way, particularly when I was during my presidential year. I think that was really important in terms of allocating time. I suppose, yes, you've mentioned a number of different areas. We all have those areas in our lives. It's about not saying yes to everything. In the beginning, of course, when you are, starting out in your career, then absolutely, well, and generally in life, I think you should say yes to opportunities that excite you. And that you feel might lead to something else even more interesting, or that perhaps you don't even know where it might lead. That's perhaps even more exciting. But there does come also a moment where it's really important to say no. And especially if you are seen as a doer and somebody who puts up their hand very often, I think that's also difficult for the individual. I know it's something I've had to learn to do. So that would be, I suppose, one tip. And well, the other is, I suppose, prioritizing, isn't it? Unfortunately, sometimes if you have a board meeting to prepare for, that means that perhaps you can't go out and see your friend for dinner the night before. And that's pretty, I suppose, tough, but I think that's a reality for all of us. And perhaps some of us don't even think about that. We see where our professional responsibilities lie, and you just get on with it. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Paola. Okay, well, we'll move on to Stephanie now, who's our next speaker. So Paola, will come back to you at the end with some of the general questions. So Stephanie is the Deputy Vice President of the Law Society of England and Wales, and she'll become the Vice President in October this year, so very shortly, and then President in 2021. So that's the way that the UK system works. And Stephanie, in doing so, will become the Law Society's 6th woman president and its first non-white president. And Stephanie has taken this on as a full-time role. And she's going to tell us more about her career path and her professional achievements, which has led to this fantastic position. So over to you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Kathleen. It is a pleasure to be here with you all to discuss the challenges and stresses experienced by women in the legal sector. As Kathleen said, I am the Deputy Vice President of the Law Society of England and Wales. I hope to bring a fresh perspective, an understanding of the experiences of underrepresented groups and what we must do to support them. I also hope through my experiences and that of many of our members to provide proof that no matter what the challenge or how insurmountable the odds appear to be, it is possible to succeed if you are determined and passionate. My journey into the profession was not necessarily conventional or without its obstacles. In 1985, my family relocated to the United States of America. Even though I lived there for the next 6 years, I always knew I would return to the UK to study law. America would have a lasting impression upon me. I'd be overwhelmed by the poverty, the injustices, people unable to access justice because of their socio-economic position, people struggling to exercise their rights, people having little or no rights because of the colour of their skin, and how I longed to make a difference, to have my voice heard, to encourage and inspire the voiceless to speak. I began my career in private practice, but was made redundant twice in as many years due to the decline in publicly funded work. I decided to move in-house, attracted by the opportunity to be more flexible in my working and to be closer to the decision-making process. Back in 2004, working in-house wasn't really talked about as much. Certainly routes into the profession weren't clear. And when I told my first recruitment consultant that I wanted to work in the city, I was told that I wasn't being realistic. So getting my first job in the city was a real coup. In 2010, I completed my master's in public law and global governance at King's College. In 2008, I graduated. And after 4 attempts, I am the Deputy Vice President of the Law Society of England and Wales. It is fantastic to see a digital room containing so many confident, ambitious, successful women who have already done, are currently doing, or are seeking to do great things in their careers. I also commend the men here. We need male champions to increase the pace of change. In 2019, we marked, as Amanda referred to, 100 years since women were first legally entitled to enter the solicitor's profession in this jurisdiction of England and Wales. Our latest data shows that over 50% of practicing solicitors are women, the first time ever that female solicitors have outnumbered their male colleagues, and 62% of new entrants to the profession are female, while women make up 63.6% of new trainees. We at the Law Society are delighted to see the progress that the legal profession has made on diversity and inclusion in recent years, but we fully believe more needs to be done. That is why we are investing in ensuring that we have the right data, the right methodology, and the right partnerships in place. Achieving gender in the legal profession, as in any other sector, requires change in mindset, which can take a long time, but requires a consistent, coherent, and strategic approach. At senior levels, women account for only 28% of partners in large firms. Women aged 36 and older are leaving the profession, often at the point when they have the skills and experience to become partners. We also know that equal pay remains an issue, with pay differentials exceeding the national average. In 2018, the Law Society conducted an international survey to find out why this is the case. And our research identified many obstacles to the progression of women's careers in the law. These included unconscious bias, a difficult work-life balance, and traditional networks and routes to promotion being male-orientated. It is vital that these issues are addressed if the solicitor profession is to be inclusive and to truly reflect the diversity of the society it seeks to serve. Almost 8,000 people responded to the survey, making it the largest international survey ever conducted on this topic. Respondents included women and men from all over the world working in law firms, with 5% of respondents identifying as LGBT+Q, 13% as BAME, Black, Asian, Minority Ethnic, and 4% as disabled. The survey found that although half of the respondents said they thought there had been progress on gender equality over the last 5 years, there was a large difference in perception by gender, with 74% of men reporting progress in gender equality compared to 48% of women. Unconscious bias was perceived to be the main barrier to career progression, and only 11% reported unconscious bias training being consistently carried out in their organisation. Unacceptable work-life balance stopped women from reaching senior levels, with 49% responding it was the second most important reason for their progression. Traditional networks and routes, sorry, my iPad has got a mind of its own at the moment, apologies. So traditional networks and routes to promotion were cited by 46% of respondents as the third main barrier, as these routes and networks are predominantly male orientated. Oh, I think I've said that part. But more people than ever think flexible working practices are beneficial, with 91% of respondents citing it as critical to improving diversity in the legal profession. However, there are solutions to these barriers. It was fundamental to our research that we sought ideas and initiatives to address and overcome the issues which are preventing a level playing field in the profession. For example, it is crucial that we acknowledge that everyone, men and women, have unconscious biases so that we can work to counteract them. Ways to address and mitigate unconscious bias include evaluating recruitment, selection, and promotion processes so that they measure relevant competencies fairly and without adversely impacting on any one group of candidates. Businesses should employ appropriate allocation processes to ensure that women and men have equal access to the most valued work and devise objective salary structures, which are transparent and ensure that everyone is paid fairly according to skills and contribution. In addition to the mandatory gender pay gap reporting, ethnicity, disability, and socio-economic background pay gaps should be monitored, giving us a more comprehensive picture of the level of equality in organisations. And we should encourage men and senior leaders to work flexibly so the practice is embraced as positive and becomes the norm. Flexible working should be extended to everyone, regardless of role or caring responsibilities. And each person should be given the right technology and equipment to ensure everyone is capable of doing their work. The damaging and unfair perception that not being able to work late at short notice or not being available at all hours of the day and night signals a lack of commitment should be challenged wherever encountered. Beyond unconscious bias, the gender pay gap and flexible working, it also is necessary to confront wider problems. All firms and organisations should adopt zero tolerance for sexual harassment and inappropriate behaviour and support victims and witnesses when they speak up, countering fears of negative ramifications. Men at all levels of the profession should use the power and influence afforded to them to champion change, acting in solidarity with women looking to drive initiatives which make workplaces more inclusive for everyone. And finally, diversity and inclusion should be placed at the centre of all business planning, prioritised in the same way as other fundamental strategies. It is through measures such as these that we believe real change can be achieved and the barriers to women's career progression can start to crumble. Ultimately, a diverse and inclusive legal profession is vital to ensure that we reflect the communities that we serve. All of you in this room and many beyond can and should be part of the change that realises this. It is my intention to leave the solicitor profession more diverse and inclusive than the one I entered, but this must be a shared ambition amongst us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. I entirely agree with you that your perspective on needing to have a diverse workforce in all senses in order to have the best possible people in the organisation. But just thinking for this purposes, as a woman, do you think, and it's quite funny because you're following another woman in your leadership role, do you think that there's anything about you as a woman that you bring to the organisation as a perspective because you are a woman that perhaps a man wouldn't have done? And do you think you and Christina have been able to achieve more or less than perhaps a man in your situation?
Well, what I would say is that what I bring is a diversity of thought. It's a moral imperative, a business imperative, that we absolutely have a diversity reflected in our organisations, in our senior leadership posts. But not only do we have diversity, but we are inclusive, because that absolutely makes a difference. There is no point putting someone in a position or giving them a seat at the table if they do not feel included. So it's absolutely important. But of course, Christina, who was or is the immediate past president, Simon is our current president and David will become the next president, and myself are absolutely committed to the diversity and inclusion agenda. And we are clear as to the fact that this will remain, along with the rule of law and other pressing issues at the moment, that this will remain top of the agenda. There has been a fear, of course, that with the pandemic, that diversity and inclusion and the inequalities that it brings about would get pushed to the back of or to the bottom of the agenda. But we're absolutely clear. So what does Christina, myself bring? As I say, diversity of thought. And absolutely, we would say Christina got the discussion going, was spearheading the survey, the largest ever conducted. And what I'm doing is continuing that work along with my colleagues and keeping diversity and inclusion on the agenda.
Great, thank you. And Christina's obviously made such an impression in my mind that I've missed out the two men in between you, so apologies to them. We've had a specific question to you in relation to unconscious bias. So obviously you've talked about unconscious bias, and that's, as an employment lawyer, I know how important it is to address that. But what do you think the main unconscious bias is that needs to be addressed to ensure career progression and appropriate inclusion of women in the legal profession, if it's possible to find just one?
Well, I think there are a number of unconscious bias. The biggest thing is, of course, is that, as I said, we all have unconscious biases. So we need to recognise what those are, and where others perhaps recognise those perhaps before we do, that they are pointed out to us. But of course, we need to look at our recruitment practices, and the unconscious bias that can filter through within the recruitment advertisements. You know, certainly in this country, suggesting or asking for qualifications for a job that is not necessary to do that role. But unconscious bias in terms of cultural affinity, and what I mean by that is, you know, we've heard stories. So the Law Society is conducting research currently at the moment to look into the experiences of BAME, that's the current acronym in the United Kingdom, Black, Asian, Minority, Ethnic, the experience of BAME solicitors, and in particular Black solicitors in the profession. And one of the things we hear, and certainly those from a socially disadvantaged background, is when we talk about cultural affinity, is that if we go skiing or to play golf, those are things that you may not have had exposure to for one reason or the other, but the senior person may be more inclined to be affinity or to be aligned to the person who has played golf, who knows about skiing and so forth, and that creates barriers. So we really have to think when we're putting together policies and procedures, putting together social events, and even the language we use, we absolutely have to think about, is it inclusive?
Thank you. That's great. Okay, I can see some questions in, and there's a few things I want to ask the group as a whole. But for now, Stephanie, thank you very much for your contribution and your comments. And I'm going to move on to our final speaker, Melissa, if you're able to come up on the video. So Melissa is the first female president, so we have a first in this situation, the first female president of the Law Society of Hong Kong, and that was established back in 1907. So it's been some time coming, and Melissa is in her third year of presidency. Before that, she was the vice president from 2014 to 2017. Melissa was also the founding chair of the International Legal Affairs Committee and the Pro Bono Committee of the Law Society. She has an impressive array of countries in which she is able to practice. So she's qualified to practice as a solicitor in Australia, in England and Wales, and in Hong Kong. And as well as being a solicitor, she's a notary public, a civil celebrant, and a accredited mediator, and a China-appointed attesting officer. So I think she can certainly do more than me, maybe if not the rest of the committee. Melissa is also president-elect of the LAW AIJA, and in Hong Kong for the government, she's chairing the Committee of the Promotion of Civic Education. So it's not surprising with all that devotion to public service that Melissa was awarded the Medal of Honor in 2006 and Justice of the Peace in Hong Kong in 2010. So Melissa, thank you for sharing your advice and guidance with us, and over to you.
Oh, thank you, Catherine. It's really indeed a pleasure and honor for me to be here in the UIA Women Bar Leaders Day. It's great that I can join fellow female bar leaders to share with you the situation in Hong Kong and also my experience to becoming a bar leader. As Catherine just mentioned, I took up the Office of Presidency of Hong Kong Law Society in 2018. I'm really very proud to be part of my team with my 3 vice presidents. Because in my team, it really shows how we are embracing the value of diversity and inclusion. For my 3 vice presidents and myself, it really represents diversity in gender, culture, religion, ethnicity, and legal practice. And let me share you and tell you more about this. Actually, out of myself and my 3 vice presidents, one is an atheist, one is a Muslim, one is a Jew, one is a Christian. So we got like diversity in religion. And as to cultural ethnicity, 2 are Chinese, one is Caucasian, South African, is British, Egyptian, ethnic Egyptian. So it's very interesting, and it can really show that the inclusive culture we have at the Law Society of Hong Kong Council and also Hong Kong as a whole. Hong Kong Law Society places very high importance on the value of inclusion and equality. We always have been encouraging our members to do the same, because we see it's very important that every single of us, we must have equal opportunity to succeed. And for the legal profession, inclusiveness in the workplace can enhance team dynamics and give us a competitive advantage, and also increase the potential talent pool for Hong Kong. Hong Kong aims to place itself as an international legal hub. And we are very proud to say that for the past 25 years, since the year in 1994, we have adopted an open door policy. We embrace diversity, and also we welcome legal talent from other jurisdictions to join and to strengthen Hong Kong legal services sector. You can see, like at present, Hong Kong Law Society, we have 12,000 members. But we also have like 1,600 registered foreign lawyers from 33 jurisdictions. And locally, we have 900 law firms. But we also have 90 registered foreign law firms from 22 jurisdictions. It just adds to the diversity of legal services, and it can really help our like the public and our client, because they can, in a small place, they can get legal advices from different jurisdictions. So, and also we can see in the past like 20 years, many registered foreign lawyers, they are now admitted as Hong Kong lawyers after taking an exam. And we can also see a number of registered foreign law firms. They are now converted to be like a Hong Kong law firms. Okay, at this juncture, maybe I should concentrate more on the gender diversity in Hong Kong. I think for the Hong Kong legal profession, a striking diversity deficiency is gender imbalance. The proportion of women lawyers varies at different stages of their career path in a law firm. On the junior part, I think now in university, for those doing law, I think women make up around 65 to 70%. At the entry level, for trainee solicitors, women make up around 62%. And for the assistant solicitor, 60%. And on the partnership level, it's around 30% are women. So we can see, although more than half of the new entrants to the profession are female, only 1/3 in the senior level of female. And of course, we just heard about Stephanie mentioned about unconscious bias. I think that is a very important issue. And following a number of exchanges with the Law Society in England and Wales, I think in Hong Kong, maybe 9 months ago, we also undertook a survey. I think it is important for us to sort of address the issue of unconscious bias and how it affects, and take some positive steps to try to rectify that. And I think also by exchanges with other bar leaders, I think we have a great platform. We can sort of learn from others and how we can address the issues. And I think it's a very great way to find out the way forward. And I think it's very important, like even on a firm level, on matters like allocation of work and job promotion, because all those will affect the woman coming to the top level. And if we don't address them promptly, we can see a consistent loss of woman talent at different stages in their career. And also, I would also like to mention about the judiciary diversity. Because we can see for the judicial diversity is a very important aspect. Because lay people do expect the judiciary to be like reflective of the population as a whole. So it can indicate fairness. So we have, in a sense, a general culture of inclusivity in the solicitor branch, in the legal profession, and also the judiciary. For the judiciary in Hong Kong, I think they really embrace diversity of ethnic and national backgrounds. And in Hong Kong, one very important and distinguished feature is in our Court of Final Appeal. Under the basic law, the Court of Final Appeal, they may include judges from other common law jurisdictions. So we can see Hong Kong is very fortunate to be able to appoint judges from other common law jurisdictions. We attract people of the highest caliber sit in our Court of Final Appeal. However, when we look at it from the angle of gender diversity, we can see right now in the judiciary, that's a striking diversity deficiency. The gender imbalance is actually very serious. I think out of all the judges in Hong Kong, the female judges only represent 32% of the total numbers. And in the Court of Final Appeal, only 2 out of 24 judges are women judges. So it's only about like maybe 8% are women judges at the Court of Final Appeal. So in places like Hong Kong, where the judiciary, they will select the judges from the legal profession. So we can see a gender diversity deficiency at the top of the legal profession will actually lead to a gender diversity deficiency in the judiciary. So this is an issue that we have to address earlier in the legal profession. I think as the first female president in Hong Kong Law Society, my main task is to encourage a culture of gender diversity and inclusion in Hong Kong. And I think there's a lot we have been doing, because since I took up the presidency, I've been looking at other jurisdictions, how they're trying to address the issue. And I do pick on brains other legal brains on how they do it. And I think it's a great way to learn. And we can sort of transport the idea locally to Hong Kong. So that's why we have been like collecting data, doing a survey. And also we're developing mandatory courses for our lawyers to raise the awareness and to promote the importance of gender diversity. I think in the future, there's still a lot we have to follow up, because we have done the survey, we have looked at the numbers, and we have sort of set up policy. But from the policy stage to the implementation stage, there's still a lot we have to follow up. And maybe I can share a bit about how I become a leader of the Law Society. I think initially, like, I started my career as a solicitor because of family influence, because my dad, he was a lawyer, he was a judge, and also worked in legal department. So that's why, since a very young age, I see the very importance of justice and the rule of law. So it just come naturally that I took up the career as a lawyer. But I think why I get involved, I think it's very important to get involved in Law Society work. Why I started is like there's a lot of like free legal advice. They are posting up circular, asking people to join and take up some volunteering work. I think that is a very good start, because in the initial stage, we are, I think they have a number of schemes devised by the Law Society of Hong Kong. They want to get people, get volunteers to help out. And at a young age, this is the first, it's the best way to sort of start off. You start off doing pro bono work under guidance and under supervision of others, more senior lawyers. And you feel there's a calling from our heart, then we should help others. There's so many people who are underprivileged. And back in the 90s, like 20 years ago, in Hong Kong, a lot of people, they don't really have that, the access of justice is a problem. And like most of the legislation, they are all in English. In court, people are using English as a language. But the lay person in Hong Kong, they're all speaking Cantonese. So it's important to bring the law from the court, from the law firm, to bring it to the public, to bring it back to the community. And there's a lot of things we have to do. How to make it like a more user-friendly, so that general can understand, and to raise their legal awareness, and to feel that like law is not something up in the ivory tower, not just up in the court. It's something that they will face every day in their life. It's part of life. And also, there's a good saying, like I heard a judge there said some time ago, the rule of law is not just for the lawyers or the judges. It is for everyone in the society. So everyone must understand their duty to respect and defend the rule of law. And it is with that, we are right now, up to now, Hong Kong Law Society has been like trying to get everyone, all the public, the people in the community to get involved and to be part of the rule of law. It's very important. Since my involvement in Law Society, I joined many committees, and I just work steadily, learning and walking in the footsteps of others. I really have to say, I've never sort of think I have the aim to be like the president of Law Society. I think maybe back when I first joined the committee, this is like too far-fetched. So I thought, well, just every day I take every day as it is, try to learn something, try to do something good, or bring something good back to the community and live happily. That's my main aim in life. And I think like also I'm very lucky to have met many senior people in Law Society, and I also met many good friends. We share the same ambition, the same mission, and people are encouraging others. They are giving me more energy, and I feel more passionate to take more work on, do more things for Law Society. And I think back in like 15 years ago, a good friend of mine, they encouraged me, why don't you try to stand for council election? So I just become one of the council member. And thereafter, I just worked up to be like standing committee chairs, and also become a vice president. And I just took office like 2 years ago. And another thing I would like to share is on the of the setting up of the international legal affairs. Like, we don't just live in our own jurisdiction. The world is huge. It's important to look out and have a more wider perspective of the world. I think like back like 15 years ago, we set up the International Legal Affairs Committee. I think at that, like, Hong Kong we really position ourselves to have more trade and investment with other jurisdictions. And it's important for us to meet up with other bar leaders and also other bar associations, because we learn from us in the area of like human rights, rule of law, and professional practice, and also professional standards, etc. But it is from learning and talking with others. We can learn and grow better. I think also in the past years, Law Society have been like doing a lot of lobbying, a lot of convincing with the Hong Kong government. I think at the moment, it's very good that like the Hong Kong government give
Well, dear Melissa, we've lost you briefly there. Just see if she comes back. No. Well, perhaps we'll move on to some of the questions. I think it was almost at time anyway, so we'll see perhaps if Melissa can come back. There was, if everybody of all the panelists wouldn't mind just putting back their videos, that would be great. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to ask Melissa any specific questions. I've got 4 questions that I'd like to put to the panel based on some things that I've thought myself as we've been going through it, and some of it reflected in the questions and answers, and often those have been the same. The first one I was just going to, oh, is that Melissa?
I'm back.
Oh, hi Melissa, I'm so sorry. You went still there, so we were just about to move on to the question, the general panel questions. Did you have any final remarks you particularly wish to make?
I think I just one remark. I think for my career, I'm very lucky to be inspired and empowered by others. So I think it's important for us to empower women around us, to share our energy and share our power and support to others. I think that's important. Thank you.
Great. Well, actually, I was going to pick up on one of your other comments to start my questions, but actually that has just fed directly into another one that I wanted to ask, and 2 people have asked similar questions in the Q&A. So it's really that question of collaboration between women and men. I mean, I absolutely agree with everybody who said that obviously men need to be part of this, and that if the world isn't going to work if they're not. But looking at collaboration perhaps between women and what to do where there might feel like there's a lack of solidarity between women. And I think we all know women who perhaps have pulled the ladder up behind them and haven't necessarily been terribly friendly to women coming up behind them. And there's somebody who said there's a special place in hell for those women. And I think it was either Hillary Clinton or someone else in America, but it's a phrase I like. I can see Trish nodding her head. So Melissa, maybe just to you then, picking up on that point about collaboration, which you made at the end there, how can that be fostered, and what can we do when it's lacking?
I think like now we're in COVID-19. Of course, we try to communicate by Zoom, but I do treasure people, a good personal relationship. Sometimes if you have the same aim, you work together, you build up a bonding. I think bonding is very important. in the world, everyone needs friends. I treat the people around me as good friends, as part of the family. And I think when you talk to each other, you have to really talk from the bottom of your heart. People can feel that you're genuine and you're willing to help, and you build up trust and confidence. That's the main thing. It's a human power. I think it's a woman power. We are here to help others.
Thank you.
And to help others grow.
Sorry.
Amanda, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to tell you something that a friend of mine, another lawyer from California, said a few years ago at an event that I was at. She's called Nina Marino. And she said, think of 3 women. And so whenever you're doing anything, and you're thinking perhaps you've got a brief or a set of instructions, or you need an expert, or you've got a conflict and you need someone to refer to, think of 3 women. Same if you need a junior barrister. And if you can't find 3 women to put on your shortlist, then look further afield. Sorry about this, Jerry. But actually, it's a really good discipline. And it works equally so in relation to any kind of disadvantaged group of people. If you want to bring people on, they're there. You just need to put them at the front of your mind. And actually, it's a really powerful, very practical, very simple way of making sure that people get up to the top of the list.
Amanda, I think that's a terrific tool that we can all use every day, as you say, to do better ourselves. The only thing I would add to that is to look as well to people who are junior to you. The way that we raise up a generation of women lawyers who are going to nurture and mentor and help other women lawyers is for us to all do that ourselves, as I know all of you do. Make special points to take care of and help the younger women who are in your sphere, whether it's in the Bar Association or in your practice setting, and demonstrate to them that you care about raising up the next generation of women lawyers, because that's what will make them do the same.
I'd just like to add.
Sorry, go ahead, Paola.
Sorry. I just wanted to add on the specific point when we're talking about women who are perceived as perhaps not supporting others below them. I suppose if that is somebody's experience, then I would encourage you to go and speak to that person, particularly if it is a person who you admire or that has done really interesting things. And so maybe it is someone that, you know, perhaps you could learn from. I think anyone, if they are approached personally, would find it very hard not to respond to that approach. And it may be, without wishing to make excuses, it may be that that person doesn't realise that that is what they're doing. And in fact, by being approached, it could then open up the doors for other people.
Thank you. That was exactly the question I was going to ask. Not wanting to be negative, but what to do if you find somebody. Stephanie, do you have a view on this? And if you have any personal experiences which you want to anonymise and share, then please do, but otherwise more generally.
Well, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that the survey highlighted that we conducted was that one of the greatest barriers to women's progression is women themselves. So I absolutely concur with everything that's been said, and in particular what Melissa says absolutely resonates with me. And I think in this new virtual world, you know, I often talk a lot about networking, and I credit networking with me being able to get to where I have gotten to today. And in this virtual way of working, this new way of working, it does have its disadvantages because you cannot reach out or individuals, junior members who would necessarily at the end, because when this finishes, we hit the leave button and we all disappear. Whereas if we were physically present, you know, there would be individuals queuing up to, or coming up to us to ask us questions, you know, or ask for our details and so forth, or ask for a piece of advice, or take a picture. That is what we're not having at the moment. And whilst people are reaching out to us via social media and so forth, it's not the same. We are social creatures, and I, for one, can't wait to get back when it's safe to do so, out and about and meeting people, and you know, and taking people with me. That's absolutely why I'm doing the things I'm doing, why I chose to do this role full-time as opposed to part-time, because it's about who can we take with us.
And that brings me really neatly onto the other, Patricia's giving you a round of applause there. That's bringing me onto the next issue which somebody has raised, and which I have had raised with me quite a lot of times, which is the impact of this lockdown and this impact of this incredible pandemic which we're all experiencing. And of course, so far it does seem that women, working women, or not just working women, are being disproportionately impacted. And Emma has put a question in the Q&A there, particularly those who are primary carers or shielding, been impacted by COVID. And she's asking, if we were to go into lockdown again, of course, in some places it's never quite fully lifted, but if we were to go back into lockdown again, what would the key learning points be? And specifically to keep women, I think, included, who are disproportionately impacted. I don't know, Trish, I don't know what kind of lockdown you're experiencing at the moment, if any.
So I've been incarcerated in my house since the early part of March, as have not 100% of American lawyers, but a really lot of American lawyers, just as a safety factor. And it's interesting to me because I think there are sort of two sides, if you will, to this pandemic coin. On the one hand, for women who are dealing with childcare issues or taking care of older parents' issues or whatever, there is a flexibility about this new environment that has lots of positives, and I don't think we can ignore that. There have been demonstrable positives in some respects, but I worry about the voluntary return to our offices. At least in this country, many of the offices that are opening again and that will open in the coming weeks and months are doing so first on what is called a voluntary basis, right? Come in if you want to. Well, I'm sorry, almost none of our children are in school. And if you're the mom, there is no come in if you want to. You are, by definition, required to stay at home with your young children if you have them. So we have to be really careful about things that are intended to be neutral that are in fact entirely disproportionate in terms of their impact on women who are caregivers. And that's going to require a lot of intentionality in all of our practice settings as we open back up.
I absolutely agree with that. And I think it's quite interesting to see what will happen in the future with, sorry, I'm not sure who's just about to say something, but I was going to bring it to Stephanie, who said that the flexible working and flexibility should be extended to everybody in the future. And we've had this mass global experiment where we've seen it can work. Stephanie, I'll just see if you've got any further thoughts on that, and then I'll go to whoever it was. I think it might have been Amanda who was just about to say something.
Well, absolutely. I mean, and quite right, Patricia, Trish. There is no dispute whatsoever that this pandemic has, certainly in the United Kingdom, has really shone a light on the inequalities that exist, that have highlighted it. And there was a recent article that I was trying to find very quickly, but spoke about, and Amanda's smiling, so maybe Amanda knows the article that I can't remember, but may remember. But it talked about the disproportionate outcomes for women since the pandemic in terms of childcare, even though the father and the mother are in the same household, but the mother is still bearing the brunt of the caring responsibilities. Some fathers have even trained the children to call the mother's first name out loud. But absolutely, as Trish spoke about, the encouragement of people to go back into the office voluntarily. Here in England, our children have started to go back to school. But of course, there are people who've opted, perhaps with younger kids who are not in school, in nursery, say, have chosen to remain at home because the children haven't gone into setting, or their offices aren't open, because we still have a lot of offices, businesses here that are still not open, and where individuals do not feel, because I think it's very important to highlight this, where individuals still do not feel safe enough to travel, to go into work, to leave their home. And of course, we've got a real revolution going on in terms of remote working. I'm not a terrible advocate of remote working, because for me, it presumes that everybody has the resources, the accommodation, the infrastructure, the know-how, the hardware to accommodate remote working. But I do believe that it has some very positives, but it has to be done in a way that is truly inclusive and not exclusive.
Amanda.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, that article that Stephanie's talking about was statistically showed that women were disproportionately affected in COVID-19, or remain so. I mean, the position for the English justice system is much more nuanced than apparently is the case in America, because here the courts are open, and there is a real concern at the balance between in-person and remote hearings. So as you'll appreciate, Stephanie will represent many solicitors, lawyers who don't have court-based practices, but for most barristers, not all, but for many barristers, they are advocates, and that really means that they are oral advocates and far more than advisory. So they're court-based practices very much. And it is also right to say that women bear the brunt of childcare, is what we've seen evidentially. Of course, it's right to say that if your children are at school, then as a general proposition, people's children are at school, then you can get back to more usual ways of working and so on. But actually, of course, we are in the UK in the position where children are being sent home at a very short notice. There are local lockdowns. By the way, local lockdowns do not mean that courts are not operating. And the question is, where is the proper balance that will support those people, whether they're women with caring responsibilities or those who are vulnerable, to be able to continue to practice whilst this is going on, whether it's because they've got to look after the children, or whether it's because they actually just cannot manage to get to court. So for me, it's been one of the most important drivers of the way that I've been interacting with the government and the senior judiciary, to encourage them, and not, I have to say, with 100% success, but to encourage them to see that if it's no good saying, this is a pandemic, we can throw diversity out of the window for the moment, but we'll come back to it. Because that 6 months, or however long it is, where women are not on the same playing field at the same level as the those who are able to go to court without worrying about it, not having to worry about being able to go to vulnerable parents who are perhaps shielding to take the food or whatever it is. Those people will have lost the connections that Melissa's talking about. They will be replaced necessarily by others who can take that work. And that will have a far more long-term effect on people's practices, both the positive of somebody new getting those connections, getting that experience, getting those court hearings, but also the person who's unable to take those opportunities because of COVID-19 in all its ramifications. And that, to me, is a really serious issue that we must confront, and we must not let diversity be an optional extra at this time.
Thank you, Amanda. Jerry, I'm conscious we've got 4 minutes to go, so I'm wondering whether we've got time, whether it's better to draw this to an end now, because I know you want to say a couple of things before we finish on the hour.
Sure. Well,
I'm just going to finish with one thing if I could, and there's a couple of points that I wanted to make. One thing which I'm not going to spring on the panel, but just one final thought from me is that we hear a lot about how to deal with childcare and women going through sort of maternity leaves and stuff. But one of the inspirations I've had from a senior leader in my law firm was she talked to me about her menopause. And you know, that was the first time anybody had ever talked to me about menopause and the impact that it might have on me as I'm working through my career, because as yet that's ahead of me. And I thought, wow, what a brave and important thing, and such a small little thing that I don't think a man could have talked to me about. So I think it's been fantastic to hear from you 5 women today, and so much of this we can learn from men, but a lot of it we can only learn from each other, and I thank you for that. And I'll pass that point over to Jerry, not expecting him to comment on that particular point. Thank you all.
I won't comment on that, but I will echo your thanks to this extraordinary panel. This has been, for me, not only inspiring, but I've learned a great deal. And if I can just make 2 or 3 comments that occur to me. One is, yes, the pandemic has impacts that are disproportionate on a whole bunch of different groups, including women. But I do think in a strange way, at least for me, it has given me opportunities like this one. We probably would not have had to gather together a group like this one virtually. It would have been very difficult to do this in person. That said, I want to echo Stephanie's point and Melissa's point. The in-person contact and relationships is why we're here. And I think that's what we're all missing, and we need to get back to. To me, this is an issue that has been, a third of my law school class was women. It's now 30 or 40 years later. And the fact that we're still having to struggle and discuss this issue sometimes is a source of frustration. And yet we've talked about so much that we've accomplished that it both frustrates me and inspires me as we continue to try to move ahead on this issue. And the last point is to echo Melissa's statement that this is an international issue. I participated in the French version. I've met with our Spanish speakers, who will be talking next week. So many commonalities across cultures, across languages, across countries. We should be dealing with this issue both domestically in our own bar associations. I know the ABA has been so active on this issue, but also internationally in discussions like this one. So let me thank all of you. This was a wonderful session. I know we've gotten wonderful feedback already from our participants. We do have our UIA Congress coming up on October 28th, and one of our main themes will be the Black Lives Matter movement, which I think has some issues that relate to this. I think Stephanie addressed those. We're going to be looking at the Black Lives Matter movement, both at the national United States level, but also at the international level and what it means around the world. I invite you all to join us. I want to thank all of our participants. Thank you from Hong Kong for being with us in the middle of the night. Thank you from Phoenix for being with us early in the morning. Thank you for those in Europe who took time out from the middle of your day. And thank you all. We'll see you soon.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.